Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming. It's always a pleasure to be joined by my colleague, fellow Democratic leader, fellow Brooklynite, Hakeem Jeffries, who's just off to a great start as the Democratic leader in the House. Our Joint Economic Committee has done a phenomenal job, and they've come up with all kinds of information that inform the American people as to where our economy and jobs and the good life is headed, and it's led by Martin Heinrich, who I really thank because he has been diligent and hardworking. He has lots of other responsibilities, but he's done a great job. Thank you, Martin. And I know Hakeem would say the same, and I would for Don Beyer. So thank you, Don, for the good work you have done. And we're joined by two of our leading legislators here in the Congress, Tina Smith, we all love her in our caucus, and Gwen Moore, and I'm sure everyone loves you in your caucus. Hope. Okay. All right. So now, following one of the most historic Congresses in history, where Democrats invested in American families, lowered their drug, home, and utility costs, supported our seniors, ensuring that they can retire with dignity that they deserve, all the while making the most meaningful changes in climate action in a generation. We did all that. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and so much more. Legislation that is already delivering real results for the American people. We see it every week in the different things that have been announced in all of these states and districts throughout the country. Just yesterday, 89 new transportation projects were announced by DOT. And so it's really what our work of last year is really seeking finding fruition with the American people. But, unfortunately, as we strive to build on that momentum, as Democrats strive to build on that momentum, our House Republican colleagues are gambling with American families' pocketbooks as part of a political ploy, plain and simple. Just yesterday, the House Republican Budget Committee doubled down on its threat to play political games with the first ever default. That's what the chairman did. One thing is now clear. The extreme MAGA wing of the Republican Party has hijacked the party, and it is now putting the U.S. at risk of a catastrophic default. I want to be clear, because many folks don't know just how catastrophic a default would be. It's foreign to many families because this type of political ploy is not just rare, but it's extremely dangerous. So, our amazing JEC, under the leaderships of Senator Heinrich and Representative Beyer, have laid out just how devastating the risky game could be. The report shows that a default crisis means real dollars coming out of American families' wallets and savings decimated. An American working their whole life and finally approaching retirement could lose $20,000 in retirement savings. Mortgages, car loans, credit cards will all go up. Homeowners would pay $55,000 more for a home. Families, $875 to buy a car. Small businesses, loans could go up by $2,500. And more. 18 million veterans could lose benefits. Disability, health care, and pension benefits stripped away by the Republicans. And 65 million seniors will stop getting their Social Security checks. Plain and simple. That's default. This is no picnic. This is no political ploy. This is almost life and death for our economy and the difference between living a decent life and having a really rough time to most every American. House Republicans approach the debt ceiling very dangerously. What they do is destabilizing and could very well lead to nothing short of disaster. That's a harsh word, but it's a reality if we default. For years, we've raised the debt ceiling under presidents of both parties. When President Trump was here, I was minority leader. We could have stopped it. We could have played these games unless they did something we liked, but of course we didn't. It was too serious. The consequences of brinksmanship too dangerous for the American people. Now, Republicans claim to be on the side of working families. They say they just want to lower costs. But last Congress, look who lowered costs. Democrats. We delivered. Now Republicans are gambling with American savings, benefits, and lives. It's time for the Republicans to stop playing games, to show us their plan, and ease Americans' fears. Congressman Jeffries, Leader Jeffries.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. It's an honor to be here and to stand with you as well as standing with Senator Heinrich and Senator Smith, and of course with Representative Don Beyer, the top Democrat, lead Democrat on the Joint Economic Committee, as well as Gwen Moore, one of our leading voices within the Congress on behalf of everyday Americans and working families. It is time for the extreme MAGA Republicans to end the brinksmanship, end the partisanship, and end the gamesmanship, and do what is necessary on behalf of everyday Americans to raise the debt ceiling so America can pay the bills that have already been incurred. As Leader Schumer has pointed out, time and time again, including 3 times during the administration of the prior president, House Democrats and Senate Democrats came together to lift the debt ceiling without fanfare, without politicking, without brinksmanship, because it's the right thing to do for the American people. We can have a conversation about the future of spending in America. We've indicated that time and time again. President Biden has released his budget, released his plan for investing in the health, safety, and economic well-being of the American people moving forward. The Republican budget plan is hiding in the Witness Protection Program. It's in an undisclosed location. They have failed to present it at all. They're not serious about moving forward in a sensible way. What they are serious about is defaulting on our nation's debt. Unless they can extract extreme cuts to things like Social Security and Medicare, which we will always work to strengthen and protect. The problem with this approach on the extreme MAGA Republican side is that, as Leader Schumer has pointed out, as the JEC has eloquently and comprehensively pointed out, it will have catastrophic consequences for everyday Americans. Dramatically increase costs for homeowners, for students, adversely impact retirees, Social Security recipients, Medicare recipients. A default on our nation's debt will hurt people all throughout America in every category imaginable. So it's time for the extreme MAGA Republicans in the House to come together with everyone else in the Capitol and the administration to do what's necessary to raise the debt ceiling, and then let's sit down and have a conversation about the future investments that need to be made on behalf of the American people. We can only do that when the extreme MAGA Republicans show us your plan, because the current objective that you have to simply threaten a default on our nation's debt is unacceptable. It's now my honor to yield to, okay, I was going to yield to my leader from Brooklyn, but I'll yield back to the distinguished senator from New Mexico, the top Democrat who's chairing the effort related to the Joint Economic Committee, Martin Heinrich.
Thank you, Leader. Appreciate it. So I think what's really clear from this JEC report is that the House Republicans are gambling with the American people's money, and they're not showing their cards. Leader Schumer went over this, but we voted 3 times to raise the debt limit under the previous president. Republicans in Congress voted overwhelmingly to raise the debt limit when President Trump was in office, while he added $7 trillion to the national debt, much of it through his tax cuts. In contrast, in the last Congress, Democrats worked with President Biden passed a budget bill and reduced the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars. And now Speaker Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans are threatening to default unless they get their way, but they won't even tell us what their way is. This report walks through the impacts to average Americans. What does it mean when you have a scenario play out like it did in 2011? And what's clear is that even before you get to default, there are very serious financial implications for the American people. Obviously, millions of jobs would be in peril if the economy cools. 65 million people on Social Security and Medicare could see their benefits disrupted, almost 500,000 in my home state alone, a tiny state of 2 million people. 18 million veterans could see their benefits disrupted. But before you even get to default, if we see interest rates rise the way that we saw them rise in 2011, these are the real-world impacts on average Americans. So think about this. If it costs you $54,000 more to buy a home and to get a mortgage, is that any different than having your taxes raised by $54,000 over the same time period? That's what House Republicans are doing to the American people. So that impacts small business loans, credit card loans, buying a car. All of those costs could go up long before we actually get to a default. These aren't hypotheticals. This is how the constituents in my home state and every state in the union what they'll have to deal with if we don't get this done. So it's time for House Republicans to put their cards on the table, tell us what their budget looks like. The president has published his budget. His cards are on the table, and we will work together to raise the debt limit and pass a budget and appropriations bills just like we do every year. So let's stop with the brinksmanship. Let's not hurt the economy. Let's not hurt the American people. And I get to introduce Representative Beyer, who has just been an incredible leader on the Joint Economic Committee. He's been incredibly articulate at focusing all of these issues that seem like partisan food fights in Washington into what they really mean for constituents in his district and across the country. Representative Beyer.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I want to thank Senator Schumer, the next Speaker of the U.S. House, Leader Jeffries. I'm so thrilled. Giving up the Joint Economic Committee chairmanship was hard, but to give it up to Martin Heinrich was a great, great blessing. And I'm delighted to be here with Senator Smith and my bridge partner, Gwen Moore. And my first invitation ever to be in S325. Very cool. So I want to thank all of you for the most, perhaps the biggest problem that Congress faces, the debt limit. It's a big challenge because we have to try to translate complex subjects into language that regular people understand. This report from the Joint Economic Committee does that. It divides the impacts on the American people into the harm that would be done if we just breached the debt limit and ways that millions of people will be hurt just by the brinksmanship, even if there isn't a default. To be clear, though, the worst damage would result from a default itself. You've heard the numbers. Social Security and Medicare recipients, 1.6 million Virginians don't get their checks. There's a scenario where you lose millions of jobs, a doubling of the unemployment rate, a steep decline in GDP, crashing markets, and perhaps worst of all, a worldwide recession. These threats should be enough to make Republicans want to not even stop about making the worst happening. I think that, especially given the fact that they haven't been able to push forward a budget to identify the specific cuts that they want. They say $130 billion, but then they take Social Security, Medicare, the defense budget, Veterans Affairs, interest on the debt off the table, and there's not a lot left. If they want cuts, Congress has the purse strings, the appropriations process. They can pursue them constructively without hostage-taking. But sadly, they haven't done that. In fact, the only thing they've done in the House so far is advance a bill in Ways and Means, on which I also serve, that would take us into default. This is their so-called debt prioritization bill, which would pay Chinese bondholders before they pay American troops and veterans, including 700,000 Virginia veterans. This is just unacceptable. And this is also a plan to default, as Janet Yellen's made very clear. The United States owes money it promised to pay, and it didn't make the payment. That's a default. When I asked Leader Jeffries for money, he's always asking to make sure that I paid back Gwen Moore the money that I had hurt. And that brings me to the other kind of harm.
The money you lost in is that the money he lost in his bridge game?
It's the NCAA, but whatever. So this is exactly what happened, though. Can you just imagine a decade ago, credit rating agencies downgraded our country's credit rating after Republican debt limit brinksmanship and drove up borrowing costs for regular Americans in many, many ways, hence the Joint Economic Committee report. This would affect everyone who borrows money, including the United States government. So what they're essentially doing is driving up our borrowing costs, making the Republicans to make the deficit worse rather than better. What I'm talking about is interest rates. We've heard a lot about that the last 2 weeks. The strength of Treasury bonds, the perceptions that they are the safest investment you can buy, and the dependability of the full faith and credit of the United States underpins the entire global financial system. We saw just one bank with over $200 billion of assets fail with a panic because they misjudged interest rates. So now just imagine what could happen when an entire banking system with $23 trillion of assets operates on the assumption that the U.S. government will pay its bills in full and on time, and that assumption turns out to be wrong. What the Republicans are doing here is very, very dangerous for our economy, for our country, for the whole world. They should stop and just raise the debt limit. It's the only rational thing they can do in this situation. And to pile on, it is my great honor to introduce the distinguished senator from Minnesota, Senator Smith.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Representative Byers and Leader Jeffries, Leader Schumer, Senator Heinrich, and my good neighbor to the east, Representative Moore. So in Minnesota, there is still about 3 feet of snow on the ground. And we are bracing for flooding when the inevitable, sooner or later, thaw happens. And so I want to take this opportunity to urge the Republican Minnesota House members, including Representative Tom Emmer, to think hard about what it would look like for the folks in those districts in Minnesota if they throw the federal government into a default. This Joint Economic Committee report shows that over 1 million Minnesotans who get their health insurance through Medicare are going to be wondering whether or not those payments are going to come to them. Over 1 million Minnesotans, seniors who count and others who count on Social Security to pay their bills, those payments could be in jeopardy. Nearly 300,000 Minnesota veterans could be waiting for benefits that they earned and they don't know whether they're going to come or not. So this is not that complicated. Raising the debt ceiling simply means that we will fulfill our most fundamental responsibility, that we pay our bills. Because if we don't, if these MAGA Republicans in the House refuse to do their jobs, this report lays out how everyone in Minnesota, everyone in the country, would feel the consequences of that irresponsibility. Defaulting on the debt would cause a global financial crisis as bad as what we saw in 2008 or even more. And what that means for folks in Minnesota, jobs lost, interest rates skyrocketing, homes lost, farms in default, and the global confidence and in the full faith and credit of the United States of America gone. Now, there is a reason why everyone from Wall Street to Main Street in Minnesota believes that this shouldn't happen. They are united in calling on these MAGA Republicans. Put your politics aside and do your jobs. And if maybe you think that it sounds a little harsh, that we are saying this is only about politics, let's get real here. Republicans voted to raise the debt ceiling during the Trump administration, even as 25% of the entire debt that this country has ever accumulated happened during the Trump administration. And in fact, when it's a Republican administration, most Republicans vote to lift the debt ceiling. And when it's a Democratic administration, the opposite is the situation. So that's the reality. Mr. Leader, I want to just emphasize one more thing. Mr. Leaders, one more thing. Republicans want to talk about budget cuts. We can have that conversation, but we will not have that conversation while they are threatening to push Minnesotans and their financial security over a cliff if we don't give them what they want. And we cannot have a conversation about the budget of this country if they can't even tell us what they are for and lay out their own plan and the choices that they would make. That is what is at stake here. So thank you so much. And now I'm very grateful to welcome my friend, Representative Moore.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so very much for convening this meeting. This joint economic report is very, very clear. Just imagine this sort of Dystonian Queen's Gambit that the Republicans have given us. They have said, Majority Leader Schumer, Leader Jeffries, you either let us destabilize those seniors in nursing homes who are on Medicaid. You either allow us to take away SNAP, formerly called food stamps, from those households that are, the majority of them have children in them. I know 1 in 4 children in my district go to bed hungry. You either let us destabilize Medicare and maybe even Social Security. You do that, or else we're going to crash the world economy. You either let us raise mortgage rates by $55,000 on new home owners. You either let us, kill 7 million jobs, or else. This default in the United States will have the contagion of sending us into a worldwide recession. Just imagine that. And not only are we not going to talk about leaders, what we want you to cut, but we're telling you in the beginning that not one dime of the $2 trillion in tax cuts that we provided to our rich constituents is on the table. It's not just a matter of what we want you to cut. We are not going to let you take one thin dime from the fat cats. Ladies and gentlemen, I got a great-granddaughter that falls out and rolls over the floor and screams when she can't have her way. You know what I tell her? Get up off of the floor, because you're not going to get it. We are not going to sell our seniors down the road. We're not going to sell our children down the road. And we're not going to send the world's standard, our bond rating, we are not putting it up for sale. Get up off the ground and pass this debt ceiling. Thank you.
Well done. What an appropriate ending. Okay, we'll take questions on this subject. This subject.
Leader Schumer, I have to ask you about TikTok because that's taking
This subject first, please. We'll come back to you. I asked this subject. Yes.
You all clearly believe, as we sit here in late March, that there is a real risk for default. Is it incumbent on Senate Republicans at this point to get off of the sidelines and, get involved in these discussions?
Well, look, right now the House seems to be headed not getting off the floor, heading into a brick wall, because they say, unless we get our way, we're going to default, but they won't even say what their way is. They don't have 218 votes to put it together. And so in the past, when the House has been unable to do something, the Senate has decided. But the first step, since it's Leader McCarthy who's the one who's playing brinksmanship, is for him to put out his plan. We're waiting for it. Did you want to? Yes.
Senator Jeffries, can I just ask you, is a discharge petition on a clean debt hike a viable option in the House? And if so, when will it be introduced? I understand it takes 2.5 months to ripen.
The most viable option right now is for the extreme MAGA Republicans in the House to get their act together and do what they consistently did when Donald Trump was the President of the United States of America. As has been mentioned, 3 times the House raised the debt ceiling without fanfare, because the consequences of even threatening a default are so significant, and certainly spiraling the country into a default would be devastating. And so the House Republicans, as Representative Moore indicated, need to get up off the floor, get their act together, join everyone else in the Capitol, which includes Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, and House Democrats. Do the right thing for the American people and raise the debt ceiling.
Discharge petition is not an option. Can you clarify that?
Right now, the option that is in front of us are the extreme MAGA Republicans doing the right thing by the American people.
Yes.
I understand you've laid out some specific numbers on the risk of the default crisis here. Let's say I'm asking this separately, in theory. Are you open to spending cuts this year in this budget?
Well, as
Leaders of the House and Senate.
as has been mentioned, we understand we have to negotiate a budget as we've done in previous years. Chairman Heinrich has mentioned that. But that should not be part of the debt ceiling debate.
I'm asking it separately. I'm curious.
But look, we're going to have to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and hopefully pass a budget, not a CR, but an omnibus. We did it last year, and we will try to do it again. I'm not going to negotiate ahead of time, but we are eager to sit down and negotiate a budget. In the Senate, the Appropriations Committee is Senators Murray and Collins are really talking about doing a bunch of bipartisan bills. Yes.
Up to this point, we've only seen one meeting between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy on this issue. Is it your sense that those conversations should be continuing? Has the administration given any guidance on when
Look,
those conversations?
we're always happy to sit down and talk to Speaker McCarthy or anybody else, but he's got to show us his plan. To just sit down and not have a plan, what's the point? What are we going to say? Thanks for the coffee? I mean, come on. He needs a plan to have a real negotiation, but we'll sit down with them anytime. Yes.
House Republicans have not actually put out a timeline for when they will release their budget resolution or mark it up in committee or move it to the floor. Secretary Yellen has put the X date at possibly as soon as mid-June. So is there any point in time, if you don't see House Republicans produce a budget maybe this spring, where you all would have to come to the table because it's just getting too close to the
I would repeat what Leader Jeffries said. First step is for them to put out a plan, and there's time for them to do it. They have to put out a plan. The reason they haven't is I think they're having great difficulty finding any plan that will get 218 votes. Plain and simple. Okay, now we'll go to yes.
I appreciate it. Leader Schumer, would you commit to putting legislation on the floor that would allow for a nationwide TikTok ban?
The bottom line is, look, there are some serious security concerns about TikTok and its ownership by ByteDance, a Chinese company. Our committees are giving a careful look to try to find the best way to deal with that issue.
Is that Senator Warner's bill, though?
There are a bunch of different proposals. That's one of them. I've talked to Senator Warner about it. There are a bunch of proposals out there. Anyone else want to? Okay.
Great.
Last one. Go ahead.
So this report, this was put together purely by Democratic staff without Republican input. And can you just give some detail on the $20,000 in lost retirement savings? What causes that? How does that occur?
That is based on what we saw happen in the economy in 2011. So we'll be happy to give you the citations. It largely looks at cooling of the economy and an increase of interest rates of 70 basis points, and what we saw happen play out back in 2011.
And purely by Democratic staff?
It's from the Joint Economic Democratic staff.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I think we go this way. Okay, see you in a bit.